Welcome to Science for Sleep Deep Earth, a channel where curiosity slows down and science takes the long, meandering path that lets your mind wander into comfort. Tonight, I'd like to take you somewhere that covers more than half of our planet, yet remains more mysterious than the surface of Mars. A place where darkness is absolute, where pressure would crush you instantly, and where creatures exist that seem to belong to another world entirely. The deep sea, the vast ocean realm that begins where sunlight ends and extends to depths we've barely begun to explore. Before we descend gently into those dark waters, let me ask you something. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Are you near the ocean, where you can hear waves in the distance or smell salt in the air? Or are you far inland, where the sea is just a memory or a dream? Maybe you've stood at the edge of the water, looking out at the horizon, wondering what lies beneath those endless waves. Or maybe the ocean is something you know only from pictures, from stories, from imagination. Either way, right now, you and I are about to drift together into a realm that few human beings will ever witness firsthand. Strange thought, isn't it, that we've explored more of the moon's surface than we have of our own ocean floor. We've sent rovers to Mars, telescopes to the edge of the observable universe, but the deepest parts of our own planet remain largely unknown. If you find comfort in journeys like this one, slow explorations that invite you to learn, wonder, and maybe even doze along the way, I'd be grateful if you gave this a like or subscribed. It helps this little corner of calm reach others who might need a gentle pause in their day or a quiet companion at night. Thank you for being here, and thank you for bringing your curiosity with you. Now, let's begin our descent into the blue. Picture yourself at the ocean's surface for just a moment. The water sparkles in sunlight, maybe gently rolling with waves, maybe choppy with wind. From here, the ocean seems familiar, almost comfortable. But beneath your feet, if you could see through the water, you'd notice something remarkable. The ocean floor doesn't just slope gradually downward. It falls away in layers, each one a distinct world with its own conditions, its own inhabitants, its own mysteries. The ocean covers about 71% of Earth's surface. That's roughly 140 million square miles of water. And while we tend to think of it as one thing, the ocean is actually a series of zones, stacked like floors in an impossibly tall building. The part we know best, the part we swim in and sail across, is just the top floor, the thinnest veneer of a vast vertical realm. The sunlight zone, also called the epipelagic zone, extends from the surface down to about 200 meters. This is where most ocean life concentrates, where photosynthesis is possible, where coral reefs bloom and fish schools dart in the light. It's warm here, relatively speaking, and bright. Sunlight penetrates, though it changes as you descend. Red light is absorbed first, within just a few meters, then orange, then yellow. By the time you reach 30 meters down, the world has taken on a blue-green hue. And deeper still, even that fades. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we drift too far into those depths, it's worth remembering that for most of human history, the ocean itself was already mysterious enough without worrying about what lay in its deepest parts. Ancient peoples knew the sea as both provider and threat. It gave them fish, transportation, and trade routes, but it also brought storms, shipwrecks, and the very real possibility of death. The surface was dangerous enough. What lay beneath was beyond imagination. Early sailors had no way to measure depth beyond the reach of their ropes. They would lower weighted lines, hoping to touch bottom. But in the open ocean, the floor was too far down. The rope would run out, and they'd be left with nothing but the knowledge that the water was deeper than they could fathom. Literally, a fathom is 6 feet, the length of rope a sailor could extend with outstretched arms. When the ocean exceeded even hundreds of fathoms, it might as well have been bottomless, so they told stories instead. Every culture with a connection to the sea developed myths about what lived in the depths. The kraken of Scandinavian legend, a massive squid or octopus that could drag entire ships beneath the waves. Leviathan from biblical texts, a sea monster of incomprehensible size. The Japanese namazu, a giant catfish that caused earthquakes when it thrashed. These weren't just entertainment. They were explanations for the unexplainable, ways of giving form to the terror of the unknown. Even today, with all our technology and knowledge, the deep sea retains that aura of mystery. We've mapped less than 20% of the ocean floor in detail. We've explored even less than that directly. There are mountain ranges in the deep ocean taller than the Himalayas that most people have never heard of. There are trenches deeper than Mount Everest is tall. There are ecosystems thriving in conditions that, until we discovered them, we thought were impossible for life. As we continue this journey, we won't rush. There's no need. The deep sea has been here for billions of years. It will be here long after us, so we can take our time to drift downward slowly, letting understanding unfold layer by layer. We'll explore how the deep sea was discovered, how pressure and darkness shape everything that lives there, and what strange creatures call this abyss home. We'll meet the scientists and explorers who dared to descend into the dark, and we'll look at the surprising connections between the deepest ocean and the health of our entire planet. We'll even ask what it means that we're only now beginning to understand this vast part of our world, and what we might lose if we don't protect it. But for now, just notice the feeling of letting the surface slip away. Think about the last time you looked at the ocean, whether from a beach, a boat, or even just a picture. Did you wonder what was down there? Did you imagine the depths? Tonight, that's exactly where we're heading. Not with submarines or diving gear, but with imagination and knowledge. Because in its own way, the deep sea is as alien as any planet we might visit, yet it's right here, beneath the waves, waiting patiently in the dark. For much of human history, the deep ocean was not just unknown, it was considered unknowable. The prevailing belief, even among scientists, was that nothing could live in the deep sea. The reasoning seemed sound enough. The pressure would crush any living thing. The darkness would make photosynthesis impossible. The cold would freeze any creature that ventured too far down. Without sunlight, without warmth, without any apparent source of food, the deep ocean must be a barren wasteland, a liquid desert devoid of life. This idea was so widespread that it had a name, the Azoic theory, from the Greek words meaning without life, proposed by naturalist Edward Forbes in the mid-1800s. It suggested that ocean life tapered off with depth and disappeared entirely below about 600 meters. Forbes based this on his own observations, dredging samples from increasingly deep waters, and noting that the number and variety of organisms decreased as depth increased. He extrapolated that at a certain point, life would cease altogether. For decades, this theory went largely unchallenged. Why would it? No one had any evidence to the contrary. The technology to explore the deep ocean didn't exist. The deep sea might as well have been on another planet. It was inaccessible, invisible, effectively beyond the reach of human inquiry, and so it remained a blank space, filled with assumptions rather than knowledge. The first hints that the Azoic theory might be wrong came from an unexpected source: telegraph cables. In the 1850s and 60s, as countries rushed to lay submarine telegraph cables across the ocean floor to enable rapid communication between continents, they faced a practical problem. The cables sometimes broke or needed repair. When crews hauled damaged cables up from depths of thousands of meters, they found something surprising. The cables were covered with living organisms. Barnacles, corals, mollusks, even tube worms had attached themselves to the cables and were thriving at depths where nothing should have been able to survive. This was puzzling, but not yet definitive proof. Perhaps these creatures had attached themselves in shallow water and simply clung on as the cables sank. Or perhaps they drifted down after death. Scientists needed more evidence, more systematic exploration. And that exploration came with one of the most important oceanographic expeditions in history, the voyage of HMS Challenger. In December 1872, the British Royal Navy ship HMS Challenger set sail from Portsmouth, England, on a mission that would last nearly 4 years and cover almost 70,000 nautical miles. It was the first expedition organized specifically to study the ocean in a comprehensive scientific way. The ship had been modified for research, with laboratories, specimen storage, and equipment for dredging samples from the deep. On board were 6 scientists led by Scottish naturalist Charles Wyville Thomson. The Challenger expedition collected samples from depths previously unexplored. Using weighted dredges and nets, they hauled up mud, rocks, and creatures from the ocean floor. At station after station, they lowered their equipment into the abyss, waited hours for it to reach bottom, then slowly winched it back up. It was exhausting, monotonous work, but the results were revolutionary. They found life everywhere they looked, not just in the shallows, but at depths of 3,000 meters, 4,000 even, 8,000 meters and beyond. Strange, alien-looking creatures that no one had ever seen before. Blind fish, translucent shrimp, delicate jellyfish, spiny sea urchins. The deep sea was not barren. It was teeming with life, just life adapted to conditions utterly unlike those at the surface. One of their most famous discoveries was from a depth of over 8,000 meters in what would later be known as the Mariana Trench. They hauled up samples of fine mud and, within it, microscopic organisms and trace evidence of larger life. The Azoic theory was dead. The deep ocean was alive, and it was far stranger than anyone had imagined. The Challenger expedition brought back so many specimens, so much data, that it took scientists decades to catalogue and analyse it all. The final report ran to 50 volumes, published over 19 years. It described over 4,000 previously unknown species. It mapped ocean currents, temperatures, and depths. It transformed oceanography from a collection of anecdotes into a rigorous science, and it opened the door to the deep sea, proving that this vast dark realm was not a void, but a frontier waiting to be explored. But bringing up specimens was one thing. Actually, going down to see the deep ocean firsthand was another matter entirely. That would require technology that didn't yet exist, vessels that could withstand pressures strong enough to crush steel. For decades, humans could only glimpse the deep sea through the nets and dredges they lowered into it. The creatures they retrieved often died on the way up, unable to survive the rapid change in pressure. By the time they reached the surface, they were mangled, their bodies distorted, their colors faded. What the deep sea actually looked like remained a mystery. The first attempts to descend into the deep came in the early 20th century. In the 1930s, American naturalist William Beebe and engineer Otis Barton designed the bathysphere, a steel sphere with thick walls and tiny windows, lowered into the ocean on a cable. In 1934, they descended to a depth of over 900 meters off Bermuda, a record at the time. Peering through the small porthole, Beebe described a world of luminescent creatures, flashing lights in the darkness, strange forms drifting past. His vivid accounts captured the public imagination and gave people their first real sense of what the deep ocean was like. But the bathysphere had limitations. It dangled on a cable entirely dependent on the ship above. If the cable broke, the occupants would plummet to their deaths. They couldn't maneuver, couldn't explore freely. They were observers in a very literal cage, suspended in the dark, hoping the cable would hold. The breakthrough came in the 1960s with the development of true submersibles, free-diving vessels that could navigate independently. The most famous early deep-sea submersible was Alvin, launched in 1964 and still in operation today after many upgrades. Alvin could descend to depths of over 4,000 meters, carrying a crew of 3. It was small, cramped, and slow, but it gave scientists unprecedented access to the deep ocean floor. With Alvin and other submersibles, scientists could finally see the deep sea with their own eyes, and what they saw transformed our understanding of the ocean and of life itself. They discovered hydrothermal vents, underwater geysers where superheated water erupts from cracks in the ocean floor, surrounded by ecosystems that thrive in complete darkness, feeding not on sunlight but on chemicals. They discovered new species at a dizzying rate, from giant tube worms to yeti crabs to fish with teeth so long they can't close their mouths. They discovered mountain ranges, underwater volcanoes, vast plains of sediment, and canyons that dwarfed anything on land. Each dive revealed something new, something unexpected. The deep sea was not uniform or monotonous. It was complex, diverse, dynamic. It had weather in the form of deep ocean currents, geology that rivaled any continent, and biology that defied every expectation. And we were only scratching the surface, or rather, the depths. As technology improved, so did our ability to explore. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, could go deeper than manned submersibles and stay down longer. They carried cameras, manipulator arms, and sensors, sending back real-time footage from the abyss. Autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, could be programmed to survey large areas, mapping the seafloor and collecting data without human operators. Yet even with all this technology, we've explored less than 5% of the deep ocean directly. Most of it remains unseen, uncharted, unknown. Every expedition discovers new species, new geological features, new mysteries. The deep sea is Earth's last great frontier, not because it's far away, but because it's so difficult to reach, so hostile to human life, so vast that even our best efforts barely make a dent in its immensity. As we drift through this history, it becomes clear that exploring the deep sea is not just about satisfying curiosity. It's about understanding our planet. The ocean regulates climate, produces much of the oxygen we breathe, and hosts ecosystems that may hold clues to the origin of life. The deep sea is not separate from the world we live in. It's part of the same system, connected to the surface by currents, by chemistry, by biology. What happens in the abyss affects us, even if we never see it. So as we think about those early explorers lowering nets into darkness and hauling up strange creatures, and as we consider the modern scientists descending in submersibles to witness wonders firsthand, we're really thinking about ourselves, about our relationship with the unknown, our drive to understand, our slow realization that Earth still has secrets we're only beginning to uncover. When you begin to descend into the ocean, the first thing you notice is how the light changes. At the surface, the water might be clear and bright, sunlight streaming through in shimmering columns. But light doesn't penetrate water the way it penetrates air. Water absorbs light, and it does so selectively, stripping away colors one by one as you descend. Red light goes first. Within just a few meters of the surface, red wavelengths are absorbed by the water. This is why blood looks green or black underwater. There's no red light to reflect off it. Red fish, red algae, anything that appears red at the surface becomes dark and drab in even shallow water. By 10 meters down, orange is gone. By 20 meters, yellow. The world takes on a blue-green cast, the only colors that penetrate this far. As you continue deeper, even blue light begins to fade. The water column acts like a filter, absorbing more and more light with each meter. By 100 meters, you're in perpetual twilight. The sun is just a faint glow above, and shadows have lost all definition. Everything is dim, diffuse, blue. By 200 meters, the last traces of sunlight are gone. Below this depth, no photosynthesis is possible. No plants can grow. You've entered the twilight zone, the mesopelagic, where some light may filter down during the day, but it's too weak to sustain plant life. And below 1,000 meters, you reach the bathypelagic, the midnight zone. Here, darkness is absolute and permanent. No sunlight has ever reached this depth and never will. If you turned off every light on your submersible, you would see nothing. Not dim shapes, not shadows, nothing. The darkness would be so complete that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, couldn't tell if your eyes were open or closed. It is a darkness more total than any cave, any room, any night on Earth's surface. This darkness defines everything in the deep sea. It shapes how creatures see, how they hunt, how they find mates. It creates an environment utterly unlike the sunlit world above. And yet, paradoxically, the deep sea is not entirely dark, because many of the creatures that live there make their own light. Bioluminescence, the production of light by living organisms, is everywhere in the deep ocean. It's estimated that up to 90% of deep-sea creatures can produce light in some form. They do it through chemical reactions, combining molecules in specialized cells called photophores to create flashes, glows, or steady illumination. The light is usually blue or blue-green because these wavelengths travel farthest through water. Different animals use bioluminescence for different purposes. Some use it to hunt. dangling a glowing lure in front of their mouths to attract prey, like the famous anglerfish. The anglerfish sits motionless in the dark, its bioluminescent lure dangling from a spine on its head. Small fish and shrimp, curious about the light or mistaking it for food, swim closer. And when they're close enough, the anglerfish strikes, its enormous mouth and flexible stomach allowing it to swallow prey nearly as large as itself. Other creatures use bioluminescence for camouflage in a trick called counter-illumination. Seen from below, even in the twilight zone, a dark silhouette is visible against the faint light from above. So some fish and squid have light-producing organs on their undersides that match the intensity and color of the light filtering down from the surface. This makes them invisible from below, their silhouette erased by their own glow. Still others use light to communicate. Certain squid produce flashing patterns of light, possibly to signal to mates or warn rivals. Some fish have species-specific patterns of photophores, like a barcode that identifies them to their own kind in the darkness. Bioluminescence becomes a language written in light across the black water. And then there's defensive bioluminescence. When attacked, some creatures release clouds of glowing particles or fluids, confusing predators and allowing the prey to escape in the chaos. Others produce blinding flashes of light, startling predators just long enough to flee. Some deep-sea shrimp vomit bioluminescent fluid directly at attackers, a glowing distraction that buys precious seconds. The fact that so many deep-sea creatures produce light tells you something important. Vision still matters here. Despite the darkness, despite the absence of sunlight, eyes have not disappeared in the deep sea. In fact, many deep-sea fish have enormous eyes, some taking up more than a third of their body volume. These eyes are exquisitely sensitive, adapted to detect even the faintest bioluminescent flash from great distances. Other creatures have taken the opposite approach, losing their eyes entirely. Why maintain eyes if there's nothing to see? Some deep-sea fish are completely blind, navigating instead by sensing vibrations in the water, detecting chemical signals, or using other senses we can barely imagine. The deep sea offers many evolutionary solutions to the same problem: how to survive in the dark. But darkness is not the only challenge. As you descend deeper into the ocean, pressure increases relentlessly. At the surface, you experience one atmosphere of pressure, the weight of the air above you. In water, pressure increases much faster because water is much denser than air. Every 10 meters you descend adds another atmosphere of pressure. By 100 meters, you're at 11 atmospheres. By 1,000 meters, over 100 atmospheres. At the deepest point in the ocean, pressure exceeds 1,000 atmospheres, enough to crush almost anything from the surface world. For humans, this pressure is lethal. Our bodies are adapted to 1 atmosphere. Increase the pressure significantly, and gases dissolve into our blood and tissues in dangerous concentrations. Decrease the pressure too quickly, and those gases form bubbles, causing decompression sickness or the bends, which can be fatal. Our lungs would collapse, our cells would malfunction, our very biology would fail. Yet deep-sea creatures thrive under this pressure. How? Their bodies are adapted in ways both subtle and profound. First, many deep-sea animals don't have gas-filled spaces, no swim bladders like shallow water fish used to control buoyancy, no air pockets that could be crushed. Instead, They use fats and oils, which are incompressible, to maintain neutral buoyancy. Second, their cellular structure is reinforced. The molecules in their cells, particularly proteins and membranes, are stabilized by special compounds that prevent them from being deformed by pressure. One such compound is trimethylamine N-oxide, or TMAO, which protects proteins from collapsing under extreme pressure. The deeper a creature lives, the more TMAO it contains. Third, many deep-sea creatures are gelatinous, with soft, watery bodies that offer little resistance to pressure. Without rigid structures to crush, without bones or shells, they can withstand conditions that would destroy organisms from the surface. They look fragile, and in a way they are. But that fragility is an adaptation, a way of surviving where hardness would fail. Temperature adds another layer of challenge. The deep ocean is cold. In most places, temperatures hover just above freezing, between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius. In polar regions, it can be even colder. This cold slows metabolism, making life proceed at a different pace. Deep-sea creatures often live longer, grow more slowly, and reproduce less frequently than their shallow water counterparts. But cold also preserves. Organic material sinks from the surface, and in the cold deep, it decays slowly. A whale carcass that falls to the ocean floor can sustain an entire ecosystem for decades. As scavengers pick it clean, then specialists move in to consume the bones and the fats within. These whale falls create oases in the deep, hot spots of life fed by death from above. Pressure, darkness, cold. These are the defining features of the deep sea, the forces that shape everything that lives there. And yet life has not just survived in this environment. It has flourished, evolving forms and strategies as diverse and ingenious as anything in the sunlit world. The deep sea is not a barren wasteland. It is a thriving ecosystem, just one built on entirely different principles than those we know from land or shallow water. As we drift through this understanding, imagine the darkness, the weight of kilometers of water pressing down, the cold seeping into everything. It's an environment hostile to everything we are, yet it's home to countless species, each perfectly suited to its niche. The deep sea reminds us that life is adaptable, that it finds ways to persist, even in conditions we would call impossible. And in that persistence, there's something both humbling and inspiring. If you could descend through the ocean's layers, you'd encounter different zones, each with its own character, its own inhabitants, its own rules. These zones are defined primarily by light and depth, and together they form a vertical landscape as varied as any continent. We've already touched on the sunlight zone, the epipelagic, from the surface to about 200 meters. This is where over 90% of ocean life resides. Photosynthesis happens here, creating the base of the food web. Phytoplankton, microscopic plants drifting in the currents, convert sunlight into energy, and they support everything from tiny zooplankton to enormous whales. Coral reefs bloom here, fish schools dart and shimmer, dolphins and seals hunt. This is the ocean we know, the ocean we swim in and sail across. But below 200 meters, you enter the twilight zone, the mesopelagic, extending down to about 1,000 meters. Light is fading, but not yet gone entirely. This is a transitional realm, dim and mysterious. Many creatures here migrate vertically, rising toward the surface at night to feed when the darkness protects them from visual predators, then descending to deeper water during the day to avoid those same predators in daylight. This daily migration, called vertical migration, is one of the largest movements of biomass on Earth. Billions of tons of fish, squid, krill, and other animals rise and fall through the water column every day. It's a vertical commute, a journey measured in hundreds of meters, driven by the need to balance feeding opportunities with predation risk. Scientists can detect this migration layer on sonar, where it appears as a deep scattering layer that rises at dusk and falls at dawn. The twilight zone is also home to some of the ocean's strangest creatures. Hatchetfish, thin and silvery, with upward pointing eyes to spot prey silhouetted against the faint light above. Viperfish, with teeth so long they can't fully close their mouths, adapted to grab and hold any prey that comes within reach. Lanternfish, small but abundant, with rows of photophores along their bodies that light up like the windows of a skyscraper. Lanternfish are so numerous they may be the most abundant vertebrate on Earth, yet most people have never heard of them. Below 1,000 meters, you reach the midnight zone, the Bath Pelagic, where darkness is total. This zone extends down to about 4,000 meters and represents the vast majority of the ocean's volume. Here, the environment is stable. Temperature stays just above freezing. Salinity is constant. Pressure is immense. The midnight zone is the ocean's deep interior, its quiet heart. Food is scarce here. With no photosynthesis, all energy must come from above, in the form of marine snow, a gentle rain of organic particles drifting down from the surface. Dead plankton, fecal matter, molted shells, fragments of larger animals, all fall slowly through the water, providing the only sustenance for the creatures below. It's a meager diet, and it shapes everything about life in the midnight zone. Animals here tend to be small, slow, and efficient. Many have enormous mouths and expandable stomachs, allowing them to eat prey larger than themselves because meals are rare and must be maximized. Gulper eels, for example, have mouths that can open incredibly wide and stomachs that stretch to accommodate prey. They look like living socks with enormous jaws, all mouth and stomach with very little else. Others are ambush predators, sitting motionless in the dark, conserving energy, waiting for prey to stumble into range. The anglerfish we mentioned earlier is a classic example. It doesn't chase food. It lures food to itself, minimizing energy expenditure. In an environment where every calorie counts, efficiency is survival. Deeper still, below 4,000 meters, is the abyssal zone, the abyssopelagic, extending down to about 6,000 meters. This is the true abyss, a realm of cold, pressure, and darkness that covers more than half the Earth's surface. It remains almost entirely unexplored. The abyssal plains are vast, flat expanses of sediment, stretching for thousands of kilometers with little variation in depth or temperature. Life exists here too, but it's sparse. Sea cucumbers crawl along the sediment, ingesting mud and extracting whatever organic material they can find. Tripod fish perch on the bottom using elongated fins, facing into the current to snag any edible particles that drift by. Deep-sea octopuses, pale and ghostly, hunt in slow motion, their movements economical and deliberate. The abyss is quiet, still, almost timeless. Days and nights mean nothing here. Seasons have no effect. The environment has been stable for millions of years, and life has adapted to this constancy. Species evolve slowly, change slowly, live in a world where time itself seems to move differently. And finally, below 6,000 meters, you reach the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the Greek underworld. This is the deepest part of the ocean, found only in ocean trenches where tectonic plates collide and one is forced beneath the other. The Hadal Zone extends from 6,000 meters down to the deepest point in the ocean, just under 11,000 meters in the Mariana Trench. Until recently, scientists thought little could live at Hadal depths. The pressure is overwhelming, over 1,000 atmospheres in the deepest trenches. The temperature is near freezing. Food is almost non-existent. Yet when explorers descended to the deepest parts of the ocean, they found life. Amphipods, shrimp-like crustaceans, swarmed around bait. Snailfish, pale and translucent, swam gracefully despite the crushing pressure. Microbes thrived in the sediment, processing what little organic matter drifted down from above. The Hadal Zone is not uniform. Each trench is isolated, separated from others by shallower ocean floor, and each has developed its own unique community of species. It's like having multiple islands, but instead of being separated by water, they're separated by lack of depth. Species in one trench may be entirely different from those in another, even though the environments are similar. Together, these zones form a vertical world, a stacking of ecosystems from the bright surface to the black abyss. Each zone is connected to the others through the food web, through the rain of organic matter, through the migrations of animals. The ocean is not divided into separate boxes, but flows together as one integrated system. What happens at the surface affects the depths. What happens in the depths, in turn, can affect the surface. As we drift through these layers, imagine the journey downward, light fading, temperature dropping, pressure building. Each zone is a threshold, a transition to a world less familiar, less accessible. And at each depth, life persists, adapted to conditions that challenge our understanding of what's possible. The ocean's vertical dimension is as grand and varied as its horizontal spread, and exploring it is like exploring multiple planets stacked on top of each other, all right here on Earth. One of the most remarkable discoveries in the history of oceanography came not through careful planning, but through serendipity. In 1977, scientists aboard the research submersible Alvin were exploring the Galapagos Rift, a volcanic ridge on the ocean floor where tectonic plates were slowly pulling apart. They were studying the geology, looking at fresh lava flows and measuring temperatures. What they found instead changed our understanding of life itself. As Alvin descended to a depth of about 2,500 meters, the crew noticed something strange on their instruments. Temperature readings were spiking, indicating pockets of warm water in the otherwise freezing deep. They maneuvered toward the anomalies and found towering chimneys of rock belching black, superheated water into the surrounding ocean. These were hydrothermal vents, underwater geysers where seawater seeps into cracks in the ocean floor, is heated by magma below, and erupts back out laden with minerals. The vents themselves were fascinating, but what surrounded them was astonishing. Where scientists expected barren rock, they found dense clusters of life. Giant tube worms, as tall as a person, their red plumes waving in the current. Clusters of white crabs and albino shrimp. Mussels and clams packed so densely they covered every surface. It was an oasis in the desert of the deep, a thriving ecosystem in the most unlikely place. At first, it seemed impossible. How could so much life exist here, in the darkness, at such depths with no apparent food source? The answer lay in the chemistry of the vents, the superheated water, often exceeding 300 degrees Celsius, carried dissolved minerals and chemicals from deep within the earth. Among these chemicals were hydrogen sulfide and methane, both toxic to most life, but precious to certain bacteria. These bacteria, called chemosynthetic bacteria, use the energy from chemical reactions, not sunlight, to produce organic matter. They oxidize hydrogen sulfide, extracting energy the way plants extract energy from sunlight. This process, chemosynthesis, forms the base of the food web at hydrothermal vents. The bacteria support all the other life. Some animals eat the bacteria directly. Others, like the giant tube worms, host the bacteria inside their bodies in a symbiotic relationship. The tube worms are particularly remarkable. They have no mouth, no digestive system, no way to eat. Instead, their bodies are filled with specialized tissues, packed with chemosynthetic bacteria. The worms absorb hydrogen sulfide and oxygen from the water through their red plumes, then deliver these chemicals to the bacteria. The bacteria use them to produce sugars, which the worms absorb. It's a perfect partnership, the worm providing chemicals, the bacteria providing food. This discovery was revolutionary. For the first time, scientists found an ecosystem that didn't depend on the sun, even indirectly. Every other ecosystem known, from rainforests to coral reefs to the deep-sea food webs we've discussed, traces its energy back to photosynthesis. But hydrothermal vent communities get their energy from the Earth itself, from geothermal heat and volcanic chemistry. It proved that life doesn't need sunlight, only energy and the right chemical ingredients. This has profound implications. If life can exist at hydrothermal vents on Earth, could similar life exist on other worlds? Jupiter's moon, Europa, has a subsurface ocean beneath an ice shell, likely with hydrothermal vents on its ocean floor. Saturn's moon, Enceladus, also has a subsurface ocean and shows evidence of hydrothermal activity. If chemosynthetic life arose on Earth in the deep sea, it might also have arisen in the dark oceans of distant moons. Hydrothermal vents come in different varieties. The black smokers, like those first discovered at the Galapagos Rift, belch dark plumes of mineral-rich water, creating chimney structures of precipitated metal sulfides. White smokers are cooler, emitting lighter-colored minerals. Some vents are diffuse, with warm water seeping gently through the seafloor, rather than erupting. Each type supports slightly different communities, but all share the same fundamental chemistry, life powered by Earth's internal heat. Vents don't last forever. They're created by volcanic activity and subside when that activity slows or shifts. A vent might be active for decades, even centuries, but eventually it cools and dies. When it does, the community collapses. Most species can't survive without the vent's chemistry, but vent fields are scattered along mid-ocean ridges and subduction zones around the world, creating a fragmented network of oases. Species must disperse, their larvae drifting in deep currents, hoping to find another vent before they starve. This has led to remarkable adaptations for dispersal. Some vent species produce huge numbers of larvae, playing the odds that at least a few will find a new vent. Others time their reproduction to coincide with deep ocean currents that increase dispersal chances. The deep sea, seemingly empty and still, is actually connected by invisible highways of moving water, and vent species ride these currents to colonize new sites. Hydrothermal vents also host extremophiles, organisms adapted to extreme conditions. Some bacteria thrive at temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius, far hotter than boiling water at the surface, but kept liquid by the immense pressure. These are among the most heat-tolerant organisms on Earth. Others tolerate extreme acidity or heavy metal concentrations that would kill most life. Studying these extremophiles helps scientists understand the limits of life, the boundaries of what biology can tolerate. Beyond vents, the deep sea has other chemosynthetic ecosystems. Cold seeps, where methane and hydrogen sulfide seep from the seafloor, support similar communities without the heat. Whale falls, as we've mentioned, create temporary oases. Even sunken wood can become a habitat, colonized by specialized bacteria and invertebrates that break down the lignin and cellulose. Together, these ecosystems paint a picture of the deep sea as far more complex and dynamic than once thought. It's not just a passive receptor of debris from above. It has its own energy sources, its own cycles, its own thriving communities. The deep sea is not separate from the surface world, but it's also not entirely dependent on it. It has a life of its own, literally and figuratively. As we drift through this understanding, imagine those first scientists peering through Alvin's viewport, seeing tube worms and crabs where they expected empty rock. The shock, the wonder, the immediate realization that everything they thought they knew about life's requirements was incomplete. Discovery often comes like this, not through careful reasoning, but through stumbling onto something unexpected and having the wisdom to recognize its significance. Hydrothermal vents remind us that Earth still surprises us, that there are ecosystems and processes we haven't imagined, thriving in places we thought were lifeless. And they invite us to look beyond our own experience, to imagine life not as it is here at the surface, but as it could be anywhere. There's energy and chemistry, even in the darkest, most pressurized corners of the ocean or the universe. When we think of ocean life, we usually picture fish, dolphins, whales, maybe coral and seaweed. But venture into the deep sea, and you encounter creatures so strange they seem to belong to science fiction. Evolution in the deep has produced forms and strategies that challenge our assumptions about what animals should look like and how they should live. Consider the gulper eel, also called the pelican eel. It has an enormous mouth, loosely hinged, that can open to engulf prey much larger than itself. Its body is mostly jaw and stomach, thin and whip-like, ending in a small luminous organ at the tail tip. The gulper eel drifts through the midnight zone, mouth agape, waiting for something, anything, to swim into range. When prey is scarce, you can't afford to be picky about size. Or the barrel-eye fish, with a transparent dome of a head through which you can see its upward-pointing, tubular eyes. These eyes are fixed in place, always looking up, scanning for the silhouettes of prey against the faint light from above. The fish detects movement, then rotates its entire body to align for an attack. It's a bizarre solution to the problem of hunting in dim light, but it works. Then there's the vampire squid, which despite its name is not a squid and doesn't drink blood. It's a small, gelatinous creature covered with light-producing photophores that can create dazzling displays of bioluminescent pulses. When threatened, it turns itself inside out, pulling its webbed arms over its body like a cloak lined with fleshy spines. Kichan en defensive posture that makes it look unpalatable or confusing to predators. Giant isopods, relatives of the common pill bug or roly-poly, grow to enormous sizes in the deep sea, some reaching over a foot in length. They're scavengers, feeding on whale falls and whatever organic matter drifts down. Their size may be an adaptation to food scarcity, larger bodies allowing for lower metabolic rates and longer periods between meals. The deep-sea dragonfish has one of the most nightmarish appearances of any fish. It has a long, serpentine body, massive jaws filled with fang-like teeth, and a bioluminescent barbel hanging from its chin like a fishing lure. Some species have a red, light-emitting photophore beneath their eyes, essentially a headlamp. Red light is invisible to most deep-sea creatures, whose eyes are adapted only to blue bioluminescence. This gives the dragonfish a secret flashlight, allowing it to illuminate prey without being seen. Many deep-sea fish exhibit extreme sexual dimorphism, with males and females looking and behaving completely differently. In some anglerfish species, the male is tiny, sometimes 100 times smaller than the female. When he finds a female, he bites into her and fuses his body with hers, becoming a permanent parasite. His organs degenerate until he's little more than a sperm-producing appendage. This ensures that the female, living in a vast dark ocean where mates are rare, always has a male available when it's time to reproduce. Deep-sea jellyfish come in astonishing varieties. Some are bioluminescent, flashing patterns of light across their bells. Others are deep red or black, invisible in the darkness. The giant phantom jelly has long ribbon-like arms that trail through the water for meters, capturing prey with stinging cells. It drifts slowly, gracefully, a ghost in the abyss. Dumbo octopuses, named for the ear-like fins protruding from their heads, live at depths of up to 7,000 meters, deeper than any other octopus. They're small and soft, flapping their fins to hover above the seafloor, feeding on worms and crustaceans. Their movements are gentle, almost slow motion, adapted to conserve energy in an environment where food is scarce. The giant squid, long the stuff of legend, does exist, though its habits remain largely mysterious. These enormous cephalopods can grow over 40 feet long, with eyes the size of dinner plates, the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. They live at depths of several hundred to 1,000 meters, hunting fish and smaller squid. For centuries, giant squid were known only from carcasses washed ashore or found in the stomachs of sperm whales, which hunt them in the deep. It wasn't until 2004 that scientists captured the first photographs of a living giant squid in its natural habitat, and not until 2012 that video footage was obtained. Even larger, though more elusive, is the colossal squid, which may reach even greater sizes and lives in the Southern Ocean at depths of over 2,000 meters. Specimens have been found with hooks and suckers lined with rotating teeth, weapons for grabbing and holding large prey. These are apex predators of the deep, sitting at the top of food webs in regions we've barely explored. Deep-sea sharks are another surprise. The goblin shark has a long, flat snout and protrusible jaws that shoot forward to snatch prey. The cookie-cutter shark is small but fierce, using its suctorial lips and sharp teeth to gouge circular chunks of flesh from whales, dolphins, and large fish, leaving distinctive crater wounds. The Greenland shark may live for over 400 years, making it the longest-lived vertebrate known. It grows slowly, matures late, and swims ponderously through cold Arctic waters, feeding on fish, seals, and carrion. Microbes, though less charismatic, are equally important. The deep sea hosts vast communities of bacteria and archaea, single-celled organisms that live in sediments, on rocks, and in the water column. Some produce methane, others consume it. Some break down complex organic molecules, releasing nutrients back into the ecosystem. These microbes may constitute a significant portion of Earth's total biomass, a hidden majority quietly cycling elements in the dark. And then there are the unknowns. Every deep-sea expedition discovers new species. Some are variations on familiar themes, new species of fish or crustacean. Others are so strange they require entirely new classifications. Bizarre worms, mysterious gelatinous blobs, creatures that don't fit neatly into existing categories. The deep sea may harbor millions of species we haven't found yet, perhaps more than exist on land. What unites all these creatures is adaptation. Every strange feature, every bizarre behavior is a solution to the challenges of deep-sea life. Enormous mouths for catching rare prey, bioluminescence for communication, hunting, or defense, slow metabolisms for surviving on little food, flexible bodies for withstanding pressure. Each species is a testament to evolution's creativity, to life's ability to find a way even in the most extreme environments. As we drift through this menagerie, imagine these creatures in their native darkness, not as specimens in jars or images on screens, but as living animals going about their lives, hunting, hiding, reproducing, dying, all in a world we can barely access. They are Earth's aliens, evolved in isolation, shaped by forces unlike those at the surface, yet still part of the same tree of life, still our distant relatives. The deep sea is a museum of evolution, a showcase of adaptation, a reminder that life is not confined to the comfortable, well-lit places. It thrives in the dark, in the cold, under crushing pressure. And every strange creature, every unfamiliar form, is a clue to understanding how life works, what it requires, and where it might exist beyond Earth. For all its remoteness, the deep sea is not separate from the world we inhabit. It's intimately connected to the surface, to the atmosphere, to the climate and ecosystems we depend on. Understanding these connections helps us see that what happens in the abyss matters to everyone, even those who never venture near the ocean. One of the most important connections is the biological pump, a process that moves carbon from the atmosphere into the deep ocean. It begins at the surface, where phytoplankton, those microscopic photosynthetic organisms, absorb carbon dioxide from the air and convert it into organic matter. When these phytoplankton die, or when they're eaten by animals that later die or produce waste, the carbon-rich material sinks. Some of it is consumed on the way down, but much of it reaches the deep sea, where it's buried in sediments or stored in deep waters for centuries or millennia. This process effectively removes carbon from the atmosphere, helping regulate Earth's climate. Without the biological pump, atmospheric carbon dioxide levels would be much higher, and the planet would be significantly warmer. The deep sea acts as a carbon sink, storing vast amounts of carbon that would otherwise contribute to global warming. It's estimated that the ocean holds about 50 times more carbon than the atmosphere, and most of that is in the deep sea. The deep ocean also drives global circulation patterns through a process called thermohaline circulation, or the global conveyor belt. Cold, dense water sinks at the poles, particularly in the North Atlantic and around Antarctica. This deep water flows along the ocean floor, slowly moving through the world's ocean basins. Eventually, thousands of years later, it rises back to the surface in other regions, driven by upwelling and wind. Along the way, it carries nutrients from the deep to the surface, fertilizing productive fishing grounds. This circulation distributes heat around the planet. Warm surface currents carry heat from the equator toward the poles, while cold, deep currents carry cool water toward the equator. This moderates global temperatures, making the climate more stable and habitable. Disruptions to thermohaline circulation caused by melting ice or changing salinity patterns could have profound effects on climate, potentially triggering rapid regional cooling or warming. The deep sea also stores heat. As the atmosphere warms due to increasing greenhouse gases, the ocean absorbs much of that excess heat. The surface warms first, but over time, heat penetrates into deeper layers. This slows the rate of atmospheric warming, but it also means the ocean is warming, which affects marine life, sea level, and ocean chemistry. The deep sea acts as a thermal buffer, but that buffer has limits. Another connection involves nutrients. Rivers carry nutrients from land into the ocean, where they support phytoplankton growth. When organic material sinks, it carries those nutrients into the deep. Eventually, through upwelling or mixing, deep water rich in nutrients returns to the surface, fueling new growth. This cycle connects land, surface ocean, and deep sea in a continuous loop. Human activities are beginning to affect the deep sea directly. Deep sea fishing, particularly bottom trawling, drags heavy nets across the seafloor, destroying fragile ecosystems like cold water coral reefs and sponge gardens. These ecosystems can take centuries to recover, if they recover at all. Fish species living in the deep often grow slowly and reproduce late, making them vulnerable to overfishing. Orange roughy, for example, can live over 100 years, but was fished to near collapse in some regions within just a few decades of being discovered. Mining companies are now eyeing the deep sea for valuable minerals. Manganese nodules, potato-sized lumps rich in valuable metals, litter some abyssal plains. Hydrothermal vents deposits contain copper, zinc, gold, and rare earth elements. Mining these resources would involve disturbing vast areas of seafloor, destroying habitat, and possibly releasing sediment plumes that spread for hundreds of kilometers, smothering life. The environmental impacts are poorly understood, but they could be severe and long-lasting. Pollution reaches the deep sea too. Plastics, carried by currents, accumulate even in the deepest trenches. Microplastics have been found in the guts of deep-sea animals, incorporated into food webs. Persistent organic pollutants, chemicals banned decades ago, still circulate through the ocean and accumulate in deep-sea sediments and animals. Even noise pollution from shipping, military sonar, and industrial activities penetrates the deep, potentially disrupting animals that rely on sound for communication and navigation. Climate change is altering the deep sea in subtle but significant ways. Ocean acidification, caused by increased carbon dioxide absorption, affects the chemistry of seawater, making it harder for shelled organisms to build and maintain their structures. Warming waters are changing circulation patterns, potentially reducing oxygen in the deep. Deoxygenation, the loss of dissolved oxygen, creates dead zones where most life cannot survive. These zones are expanding in some areas, squeezing deep-sea ecosystems into smaller and smaller refuges. The deep sea also plays a role in regulating atmospheric oxygen. While phytoplankton at the surface produce oxygen, much of the organic matter they create eventually sinks to the deep, where it's buried rather than decomposed. This burial prevents oxygen from being consumed in decomposition, allowing oxygen levels in the atmosphere to remain high. Over geological timescales, the deep sea has helped create and maintain the oxygen-rich atmosphere we breathe. Understanding these connections transforms how we see the deep sea. It's not a distant, irrelevant abyss. It's part of the machinery that makes Earth habitable. It regulates climate, stores carbon, distributes heat and nutrients, supports fisheries, and influences atmospheric composition. What happens in the deep affects the surface, and what we do at the surface affects the deep. We are connected to the abyss, whether we realize it or not. As we drift through this understanding, it becomes clear that protecting the deep sea is not just about preserving strange creatures or unexplored landscapes. It's about maintaining the systems that support all life on Earth, including our own. The deep sea is not expendable, not a frontier to be conquered and exploited without consequence. It's a vital part of our planet, deserving of respect, study, and care. Despite decades of exploration, the deep sea remains one of the least understood environments on Earth. We've mapped the surface of the Moon and Mars in greater detail than we've mapped our own ocean floor. We've sent more people into space than have descended to the deepest part of the ocean. The deep sea is vast, remote, and difficult to access, and that difficulty has limited our knowledge. But technology is improving. New submersibles can dive deeper and stay longer. ROVs and AUVs can survey large areas autonomously. Sensors deployed on the seafloor can collect data continuously, monitoring temperature, chemistry, currents, and biology over months or years. Satellites, while unable to see through water, can measure the ocean's surface, height, and temperature, which provides clues about deep processes. Genomic techniques are revolutionizing our understanding of deep-sea life. By analyzing DNA from seawater samples, scientists can identify species without ever seeing them, detecting the presence of bacteria, archaea, and even larger animals from genetic traces they leave behind. This environmental DNA, or eDNA, allows us to survey biodiversity much faster and more comprehensively than traditional methods. Machine learning and artificial intelligence are helping scientists analyze the vast amounts of data collected from deep-sea expeditions. Hours of video footage can be processed automatically, identifying and counting species. Patterns in oceanographic data can be detected and modeled, revealing connections and processes that would take humans years to find. Technology is accelerating discovery, but it also highlights just how much there is still to learn. Every expedition reveals something new. In recent years, scientists have discovered new hydrothermal vent fields, new species of deep-sea corals, new fish living at record depths. They've found microplastics in the deepest trenches, confirming that human impact reaches everywhere. They've observed behaviors never seen before, like octopuses brooding their eggs for years or fish using tools to crack open shells. One of the most tantalizing possibilities is that the deep sea may harbor extremophile microbes with unique biochemistries, organisms that could teach us about the limits of life or provide new enzymes and compounds for medicine and industry. Studying these organisms is challenging, as they often die or change when brought to the surface. Researchers are developing techniques to study deep-sea life in situ, using instruments that can measure metabolism, gene expression, and biochemistry at depth. The deep sea also holds clues to Earth's history. Sediment cores from the deep ocean floor contain layers of material deposited over millions of years, recording changes in climate, ocean chemistry, and biology. By analyzing these cores, scientists can reconstruct past ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and mass extinctions. The deep sea is a library of Earth's history, its pages written in mud and microfossils. There's also growing interest in the deep sea as a potential refuge from climate change. As surface waters warm, some species may shift their ranges deeper, seeking cooler temperatures. The deep sea stability may make it a haven for organisms that can adapt to its conditions. But this also raises concerns. If deep sea environments change too, where will species go then? International cooperation is essential for deep sea research and conservation. The ocean knows no borders, and many deep sea areas lie beyond national jurisdiction in the high seas. Governing these areas is complex, involving multiple countries, industries, and interests. The United Nations is working on a treaty to protect biodiversity in the high seas, including the deep sea, but progress is slow and contentious. Marine protected areas, regions where human activities are restricted, are being established in some deep sea environments. These areas allow ecosystems to recover from damage and provide baselines against which to measure human impacts. But enforcement is difficult, and protected areas cover only a small fraction of the deep ocean. Public awareness of the deep sea is growing thanks to documentaries, social media, and the efforts of scientists and explorers who share their findings. The more people know about the deep sea, the more they care about protecting it. Education is a powerful tool for conservation, inspiring the next generation of ocean scientists and advocates. The future of deep-sea exploration likely includes more automated systems, more long-term monitoring, and more international collaboration. It may also include virtual exploration, where people can experience the deep sea through virtual reality, diving to the abyss from their living rooms. Such technology can democratize exploration, allowing anyone to witness the wonders of the deep. As we drift toward the future, it's worth remembering that the deep sea is not just a resource to be extracted or a problem to be managed. It's a frontier of knowledge, a source of wonder, a realm that challenges our assumptions and expands our understanding of life. Every discovery in the deep sea reminds us that Earth is still a planet of mysteries, that there are still places to explore, still questions to ask, still wonders to witness. The deep sea invites us to be curious, to be humble, to recognize that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. It's a reminder that the planet we call home is more complex, more diverse, and more beautiful than we often realize. And in its darkness, there is light, the light of discovery, of understanding, of connection to the natural world. As we near the end of our journey into the deep sea, it's worth pausing to reflect on what this vast, dark realm means. The deep ocean is not just a collection of strange fish and extreme environments. It's a fundamental part of our planet, a driver of climate, a reservoir of biodiversity, a source of resources, and a frontier of scientific discovery. For most of human history, we've lived at the surface, looking up at the stars and outward at the land. The ocean was a highway, a source of food, sometimes a barrier. But the depths were ignored, too difficult to reach, too mysterious to understand. Now, as we begin to explore the deep sea in earnest, we're discovering that it's as important as any terrestrial ecosystem, perhaps more so given its size and influence. The deep sea reminds us of our place in the natural world. We are surface dwellers, adapted to air and sunlight, yet we affect environments we've never seen, will never visit. Our carbon emissions alter deep-sea chemistry. Our waste sinks to abyssal plains. Our fishing nets scrape the sea floor. We are connected to the deep, whether we intend to be or not, and that connection carries responsibility. At the same time, the deep sea offers hope. It shows us that life is resilient, adaptable, capable of thriving in conditions we find unimaginable. It shows us that Earth still has secrets, still surprises us, still invites exploration. And it shows us that beauty exists in unexpected places, in the bioluminescent flash of a jellyfish, in the architecture of a hydrothermal vent chimney, in the slow dance of a Dumbo octopus. The deep sea also invites philosophical reflection. In its darkness and silence, it mirrors the vastness of space. It's an inner cosmos, as profound and humbling as the outer one. To explore the deep is to explore what it means to be human, curious, ambitious, sometimes destructive, but also capable of wonder, of learning, of change. Scientists who study the deep sea often speak of it with a kind of reverence. They describe the feeling of descending into the abyss, of watching the light fade, of entering a world utterly unlike the one they know. They describe the privilege of witnessing something few others will see, and the responsibility of sharing what they learn. They describe the urgency of protecting these environments before they're irreversibly damaged. The deep sea asks us to think long-term. Its processes operate on timescales of centuries and millennia. Its ecosystems recover slowly. Its species live long lives. In a world obsessed with speed and instant gratification, the deep sea moves at its own pace, indifferent to human hurry. There's wisdom in that slowness, a reminder that some things can't be rushed, that patience has value, that the long view matters. As we drift through these final thoughts, let yourself simply rest in the knowledge of the deep. Somewhere, right now, beneath the surface of the ocean, creatures are glowing in the dark. Water is circulating, carrying heat and nutrients. Sediments are settling, recording the present for future geologists to read. The deep sea continues its ancient rhythms, as it has for billions of years, as it will for billions more. You don't need to see the deep sea to appreciate it. You don't need to visit it to be connected to it. It's enough to know it exists, to understand something of how it works, to recognize its importance. The deep ocean is part of your world, part of the system that sustains you, part of the planet you call home. And there's something calming in that knowledge. The deep sea doesn't need you to understand it fully. It doesn't demand your attention. It simply is, vast and patient and enduring. In a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain, the deep sea offers a kind of stability, a reminder that beneath all the surface turbulence, there are depths that remain constant, calm, untroubled. So let that image rest in your mind. The ocean, dark and deep, covering most of the planet. The creatures drifting through its waters, the sediments settling on its floor. The vents erupting with heat and chemistry, the currents flowing slowly through the abyss. It's all happening right now, has been happening for longer than humans have existed, will continue long after we're gone. Thank you for spending this time exploring with me. If you found this journey soothing, if it kept you company, or if it helped you drift a little closer to sleep, you're always welcome to return here whenever you need it. And if you'd like to hear more quiet explorations like this, you can follow along by subscribing or by leaving a small sign of support. It helps keep these voyages going, so that together we can keep wandering into the mysteries of science and the calm they bring. For now, let your thoughts settle like sediments drifting to the ocean floor. There's nothing else you need to do. Just let your breath slow. Let the weight of the day dissolve. Let yourself sink gently into rest. Picture the darkness of the deep sea, not as something frightening, but as something peaceful. A quiet place, far from the noise and light of the surface, where time moves slowly and life continues in its own patient way. If sleep comes, let it take you gently, as if you were drifting down through layers of water, through the sunlight zone, through the twilight, into the calm of the midnight zone. Let the pressure of the day ease. Let the darkness be comforting rather than threatening. Let yourself descend into rest as deep and restorative as the ocean itself. Good night, and until next time, may your rest be as profound and peaceful as the deepest waters, and may you wake refreshed, carrying with you the wonder of Earth's last great frontier.